His manhood hadn't risen in 2 years. Not for the Brazilian supermodel who spent a week in his private villa. Not for the Oscar winner who whispered every filthy promise she knew. Not even for the world-renowned specialist he flew in from Europe who guaranteed she could fix him. Marcus Steele, hotel tycoon, media darling, quietly broken. Then the door to his penthouse opened, and a maid in a yellow Ocean Crest apron stepped inside. She wasn't in a designer dress or dripping diamonds. Her hair was knotted up like she'd done it in a hurry. Her sneakers looked like they'd already survived a double shift, and the shadows under her eyes said sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. But the moment she moved past him, the impossible happened. Heat punched through his body, sharp and sudden, like a defibrillator to a dead heart. One look at her, one breath of her clean, simple scent, and the part of him every doctor had declared hopeless came roaring back to life. And here's the part that could burn his entire empire to the ground. She has no idea what power she holds over the most powerful man in the Ocean Crest Hotel. If you're already feeling that twist in your chest, don't just lurk. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and prove you're not heartless. Drop a comment with your city and country so we can see how far Marcus and Amara's story travels across the world. If you click away without doing it, you'll miss what might be the wildest billionaire meets Maid story you've seen all year. The next morning unfolded the way Marcus's mornings always did. Spreadsheets before sunrise, a breakfast he barely tasted, and back-to-back calls with executives who measured loyalty in quarterly profits. The flagship Ocean Crest Hotel glittered below his penthouse like a kingdom, yet he moved through it as if on autopilot, his tailored robe and perfectly brewed coffee doing nothing to touch the numbness underneath. His assistant had mentioned something about a staffing shuffle and a new housekeeper assigned to your floor, but Marcus had waved it off. Housekeepers came and went like room service trays. As long as the marble gleamed and the sheets smelled like money, he didn't care who pushed the cart. He was halfway through tearing apart a proposal when the soft click of the penthouse door broke his focus. A woman stepped in, pushing a cleaning trolley. White blouse, bright yellow apron with the Ocean Crest Hotel logo. Name tag, Amara. She paused only long enough to scan the room with a professional sweep, then quietly closed the door behind her and moved to the entryway table, writing a crooked picture frame he hadn't even noticed was off. Marcus told himself to look back at his tablet. He didn't. Amara moved with the kind of efficiency that comes from necessity, not performance. No practiced hip sway, no sideways glances to see if he was watching. She set out fresh towels, swapped glassware, checked corners for dust. Under her breath, a low melody threaded through the silence. A gospel tune, soft and steady, like something she'd grown up hearing whispered over kitchen sinks and hospital beds. She reached for a photograph on the credenza, a candid shot of Marcus and his younger brother on the beach before life became lawyers and board votes. Instead of giving it a cursory swipe, she paused, studying the image with real interest, thumb brushing gently across the frame as if she understood how rare unguarded smiles like that were in a place like this. "Don't drop it," Marcus heard himself say, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. Amara startled, turning toward him. Their eyes met for the first time. Hers were a deep, steady brown, clear even under the fluorescent exhaustion. No calculación. No recognition spark that said, "Oh, that's Marcus Steele, worth billions and trending on business feeds." Just a quick check. Was he angry? Was she in trouble? And then something almost like curiosity. "Sorry, sir," she said, voice low but firm, a hint of a southern lilt wrapping around the word. "I can come back if you need privacy." The word privacy scraped over his nerves. Because in the half-second between her turning and speaking, the warmth he'd felt yesterday didn't just return, it surged. A slow, thick heat unfurled low in his abdomen, spreading outward until his grip tightened on the back of the chair. His pulse kicked up, his breath shortened. The dead weight he'd carried for 2 years twitched, then hardened with a force that made him swallow hard. "Stay," he managed. "You're fine. I just didn't expect anyone this early." She nodded once and went back to polishing the frame, humming again, completely focused on the job. Marcus stared, his proposal abandoned. He watched the way she aligned his cufflinks without scratching the surface, how she folded the edge of his robe over the hanger instead of leaving it slumped on the chair, how she nudged the balcony door open a crack to let in sea air, because rooms this high up get stale if you lock them up all day. She moved like someone who'd spent a lifetime cleaning up other people's messes without ever being invited to the table. By the time she wheeled her cart into the bedroom, he was no longer pretending to work. Every time she stepped into his orbit, his body responded, as if some buried switch had flipped from off to only for her. This couldn't be real. Not after specialists, prescriptions, and the quiet humiliation of failing with women who were used to being worshipped. Not after 2 full years of lifelessness that had turned his bed into nothing more than expensive furniture. Yet there he stood, fingers digging into the leather of his chair, watching a tired Maid straighten his pillows and humming church songs, and his body was harder than it had been in 730 days. He should have told himself it was a glitch, a freak moment, nothing more. Instead, as the door clicked shut behind Amara and her yellow apron, Steele's world quietly shifted on its axis. Because if one housekeeper with weary eyes and a gospel song could resurrect what billions of dollars and every expert in the city couldn't, then his curse wasn't medical. It was personal, and he had just found the only woman who could break it. That was the thought pulsing in his head as he headed into yet another morning of meetings and mergers, completely unaware that chasing this one impossible spark would drag him into a war of desire, loyalty, and betrayal that might cost him everything he'd built at Ocean Crest. Marcus told himself it was nothing. Adrenaline, maybe. Salt. Some kind of short circuit after too many sleepless nights and too much coffee. Bodies did weird things under stress. Every specialist he'd seen had said so. That had to be it. There was no way, no rational, scientifically acceptable way, that one exhausted maid in a yellow apron had just solved what an army of top-tier doctors, therapists, and healing experts couldn't touch. By the time the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, he had his explanation ready. It was a fluke. He repeated it between handshakes and contract discussions, through a lunch he barely tasted. His body had misfired, that was all. Some stray neuron fired in the right direction at the wrong moment. Statistically, even a dead engine coughed once in a while. Still, he caught himself glancing at his watch every time the thought of Amara's humming slipped into his head. By 3 o'clock, the fluke theory didn't feel strong enough. Logic demanded data. Fine then. He would collect data. That evening, he texted a number he hadn't used in months. The lingerie model arrived at his private villa in Malibu, looking exactly like every fantasy the internet tried to sell him. Long legs, perfect curves, a smile that said she'd already written tomorrow's headline in her head. She poured herself into the kind of lace that usually made men forget their own names and closed the bedroom door behind them with practiced ease. Marcus watched her move. He appreciated the aesthetics. He even tried to relax, try to remember what it used to feel like when any of this meant something. Nothing. His heartbeat stayed steady. His body stayed stubbornly, humiliatingly unmoved. Jet lag? She teased after a while, though impatience edged her voice. Something like that, he said, pulling away with an easy lie and a wired transfer that made sure she'd never complain publicly. Data point 1. The next night, he stayed in town and booked a private tasting in the penthouse with a celebrity chef who'd made more than one suggestive joke in past interviews about what she could do with her hands. She cooked, they flirted, wine flowed. At any other time in his life, the way she leaned over the counter, the way her fingers lingered on his wrist when she passed him a fork, would have guaranteed a different kind of dessert. He laughed in the right places, but inside, he was a flat line. She finally gave up, cheeks flushed for more than just the stove, and focused on plating the final course. When the door closed behind her, Marcus let the silence confirm what he already knew. Data point 2. He didn't even bother pretending with the third test. His ex-fiancée swept into the private bar he kept off-lobby, smelling like expensive perfume and second chances. She'd always known how to weaponize nostalgia. Old jokes, shared memories, the ghost of a future they'd once planned. You know, she murmured, fingers tracing circles on his thigh. We were pretty good together when you weren't married to your work. He waited for his body to catch up. It never did. She left that night, looking more curious than rejected, as if she'd just confirmed a rumor she'd heard and couldn't quite believe. He didn't care. By then, the numbers were clear. 3 women. 0 reaction. So why was it that, 12 hours later, the soft rattle of a housekeeping cart outside his penthouse made his pulse jump? He was on a call with Tokyo when he heard the familiar tap of wheels over marble. The sound slid under his concentration like a hook. Without thinking, he rose from his chair and crossed the door, headset still in place, pretending to examine a decorative vase as the lock beeped and the door swung open. Amara pushed the cart in, her hair pulled back tighter today, a faint crease between her brows. She nodded a greeting, eyes flicking once to his headphone before she moved to the bathroom, already reaching for fresh towels. Heat rolled through him so fast he had to shift his stance. Statistics didn't lie. Everything all right, Mr. Steele? His Tokyo partner's voice crackled in his ear. Marcus cleared his throat, forcing his attention back to the numbers on his screen, the expansion charts, the projected occupancy rates. Fine, he said. Continue. But his body was already betraying him again, surging to full, undeniable attention the moment Amara stepped back into the main room with her arms full of folded linen. He managed to get through the rest of the call without giving himself away. Though his answers were shorter than usual, his tone clipped. As soon as he said goodbye and pulled the headset off, he found himself watching her. Really watching. She moved differently today, faster, more precise. There was tension in the set of her shoulders, in the way she scrubbed at a barely visible smudge on the window until the glass squeaked. Her humming was there, but softer, carrying a thread of worry. Rough morning, he asked before he could stop himself. For a second, he thought she might pretend she hadn't heard him. Then she straightened, glanced at him, and gave a small shrug. Just a long one, she said. Double shift. Kids running through the hallways at dawn, room service spilling coffee, that kind of thing. Kids. He filed that away. She turned back to the glass, and he noticed something else. She lined up his toiletries on the bathroom counter in the exact same order as yesterday. Razor, cologne, watch. Not quite military sharp, but close. The kind of detail most people wouldn't bother with. When she finished the main room, she crossed to the balcony doors and eased one open just a crack, letting in the salt-heavy air. Rooms this high up get stuffy, she murmured more to herself than to him. Fresh air helps. She stepped aside to adjust the curtains, eyes lingering on the skyline and the thin strip of ocean in the distance. For a heartbeat, her face softened, like she was drawing strength from the view before diving back into whatever waited for her beyond this floor. Marcus's chest tightened. He shouldn't care. She was staff. One tiny tile in the mosaic of people required to keep his life polished and seamless. But his body didn't seem to understand that. Every time she moved, every small sound she made, turned the volume up on something he'd thought was permanently muted. He started rearranging his days around those sounds. If her schedule put her on his floor at 9, he worked from the penthouse from 8:30 onward. If she rotated through the 11th floor in the afternoon, he suddenly had an urgent need to personally inspect the 11th floor suites. Conference calls were shifted. Lunches were cut short. His assistant stopped questioning why his calendar was suddenly so flexible. He told himself it was quality control. Hands-on leadership. That was the story he would have sold anyone who asked. The truth was uglier. He wanted to see what happened every single time she stepped into his orbit. And the pattern, over the next week, became impossible to ignore. Lingerie models, nothing. Celebrity chef, nothing. Ex-fiancé, nothing. Amara Williams, humming under her breath as she tucked in a corner of his duvet or straightened a stack of magazines. Instant heat. Immediate, undeniable response. Every single time. One afternoon, she dropped a bottle of polish. It rolled toward his bare foot as he stood near the edge of the bed. She bent to catch it, brushing the back of her hand against his ankle in the process. His vision actually blurred. He forced himself not to flinch, not to gasp, not to give away the way his entire nervous system lit up from a touch that probably meant nothing to her. When she left that day, wheeling her car down the hallway, Marcus stood in the doorway and watched until the elevator swallowed her. Only when she was gone did the heat drain from his body, leaving behind the familiar, hollow numbness. That was the moment denial stopped being an option. This wasn't random. It wasn't stress. It wasn't chance. His manhood only rose when Amara Williams was near. The realization sent a thrill of wild, dizzying hope through him, and a cold streak of fear right behind it. Because if one housekeeper could switch him on with a glance, she was either the cure he'd been searching for, or the most dangerous problem his carefully constructed life had ever faced. The elevator doors slid shut on Amara's yellow apron, and with it, the last of the warmth left Marcus's body. He stood there longer than he'd admit, staring at his own reflection in the polished chrome. Billionaire, hotel king, man who suddenly couldn't get through a day without timing his breathing to a maid's humming. Somewhere on a lower floor, Amara's world was continuing without him. His, unfortunately, was about to collide with hers whether either of them wanted it or not. On the other side of the city, 3 bus transfers, and 45 minutes later, Amara eased open the door to her apartment with her hip, careful not to jostle the paper bag cradled in her arms. The hallway light on her floor flickered like it was giving up. The stairwell smelled faintly of fried food and bleach. Someone's TV blared through a thin wall, laughter from a canned audience echoing down the corridor. "Z," she called softly. "Baby, I'm home." Their place was technically a 1-bedroom, but the landlord called it a garden suite to justify the rent. The garden was a rusted fire escape overlooking a concrete courtyard. The suite was 2 cramped rooms and a bathroom that wheezed every time the shower turned on. Zara was curled up on the sagging couch, a fluffy blanket pulled to her chin, a cartoon frozen mid-scene on the ancient TV. And 4-pole stood beside her like a silent sentry, clear bag half drained. "Hey, Mommy," she whispered, voice raspy but brightening when she saw the bag. "Did they have the good muffins today?" Amara's chest squeezed. 6 hours of scrubbing other people's messes, and she still felt like she hadn't done nearly enough. "They had 1 left," she said, forcing a smile as she set the bag on the tiny coffee table. "And I fought 3 businessmen and a tourist for it." "Don't worry, I won." Zara giggled, a small, breathy sound that made the whole room feel bigger. Amara knelt and brushed her daughter's curls off her forehead, checking her temperature with the back of her hand like she'd seen the nurses do. "Any pain?" she asked. "Just a little." Zara tapped her side. "Nurse Carla said that's normal." "Did you work at the tall hotel today?" Amara opened the bag and broke the muffin in half, careful to portion it around Zara's finicky appetite. "Flagship Ocean Crest. Same as yesterday." "Did you see any famous people?" "Just famous egos," Amara muttered, then caught herself and softened the words. "No one worth trading you for." She didn't mention the man in the bathrobe whose eyes followed her everywhere, the way his presence made her skin buzz and her heartbeat pick up like the old church choir back home. She definitely didn't mention the way being near him made something inside her wake up she'd carefully buried beneath bills and lab results. There wasn't room in this apartment for fantasies. There was just enough room for Zara's medicine schedule, a stack of unpaid invoices, and the alarm on Amara's phone that would drag her up in 5 hours for the breakfast shift at Mel's Diner. "Eat," she said gently. "I have to change and call the clinic." While Zara nibbled, Amara shed her yellow apron and white blouse, hanging them carefully in the narrow closet. The Ocean Crest logo was already starting to fade from the fabric, but the uniform still felt new on her skin. Temporary, like the rest of this life. The clinic put her on hold long enough for the cartoon credits to roll. By the time a tired nurse picked up, Amara was leaning against the kitchen counter, phone wedged between ear and shoulder, trying not to do the math on what another round of treatment would cost. "Yes, I'm working extra hours," she said quietly. "Housekeeping at Ocean Crest, plus the office is downtown at night. I'll make the payment. I need a little more time." They gave her until the end of the month. She hung up, set the phone down, and let herself sag for exactly 3 seconds. Then she straightened, checked Zara's line, set out her nighttime meds, and grabbed the dark polo and black pants she wore to the cleaning company's evening contracts. 3 jobs, 1 body, 0 margin for error. If she thought too hard about it, she'd break. Back at Ocean Crest, the carpets on Marcus's private floor were so thick they swallowed the sound of his footsteps. His world didn't flicker, it glowed. His glassware never chipped. His sheets were replaced the second they even thought about wearing thin. And yet all that perfection felt suddenly, aggressively hollow. "Are you okay, sir?" his assistant asked as they rode up together, tablet in hand. "You've rescheduled 3 meetings this week. The Yamamoto team is getting nervous." "I'm fine," Marcus said, the lie smooth from habit. "Just need to work from the penthouse more. Work from the penthouse." As if that was all there was to it. He waited until he was alone before he pulled up the housekeeping roster on his internal dashboard. Technically, he wasn't supposed to have direct access to that level of scheduling. That was HR's domain, but being the man who signed every paycheck came with certain perks. There it was. Williams A. Penthouse level, 9 to 11 o'clock. Every day that block existed, his calendar somehow cleared itself. At first, he told himself he was just getting ahead on operations. While she restocked his minibar, he'd ask her opinion on the new lobby scent they were testing. When she straightened a framed landscape, he'd casually mention the artist's name and ask if she liked it. "So you prefer the city pieces or the ocean ones?" he asked one morning as she dusted a vibrant canvas of neon lights reflected on wet pavement. She hesitated, cloth in hand. "The city's pretty," she said carefully, "but the ocean looks like it can't be bought." Just as he'd expected a polite, generic answer. Not that. Another day, he heard the familiar low melody from the bedroom and followed the sound to find her remaking his bed with hospital corners that would have impressed his most demanding general manager. "What's that song?" he asked, leaning in the doorway. She jumped, cheeks flushing. "Sorry, sir. Habit. My mom used to sing it when things were rough. It's just an old hymn." "It sounds like home," he said before his brain could censor his mouth. Her eyes flicked to his, startled, then softened for a fraction of a second. "Guess it's good for something then," she murmured and bent back over the sheets. Sometimes, when he cracked a rare joke, her mouth would twitch before she wrestled it back into professionalism. When he thanked her by name, her shoulders would straighten almost imperceptibly, as if the weight of being invisible eased for a heartbeat. He noticed everything. The way her humming got louder when she was anxious. The way she checked the clock, not because she was eager to leave, but as if she were counting down to another obligation. The way her smile, when it slipped free, looked like something fragile she didn't quite trust the world with. And buried under the raw, visceral pull of his body's reaction was something he hadn't felt in years: curiosity. Who was this woman who could resurrect him with song? Why did her eyes look older than her face? Why did he want to know what she did when she wasn't scrubbing billionaire fingerprints off glass? One afternoon, after she left and the silence closed in, Marcus stood in the center of his immaculate living room and realized the answer scared him more than his own condition ever had. Because it wasn't just lust anymore. It was the way she never once fawned over his name. The way she talked to the plants on his balcony like old friends. The way she treated his space with respect without treating him like a god. For the first time since his empire had swallowed his life whole, someone inside his walls made him feel like Marcus instead of Mr. Steele. He needed to know more. He also knew better than to simply ask. He picked up his phone and scrolled to a number that had been on speed dial since the first Ocean Crest opened. "Derek," he said when his head of security answered. "I need a favor." "Always, boss." "What's up?" "There's a housekeeper on my floor. Amara Williams." He kept his tone casual, like this was just another risk assessment. "Run a discreet background check. Financials, employment, family situation. Quietly. I don't want HR spooked, and I definitely don't want her knowing." There was a beat of silence on the other end, then Derek chuckled. "You finally taking an interest in someone, huh?" "Just doing my due diligence." Marcus snapped a little too fast. "She has access to my space." "It's standard." "Sure thing," Derek said, amusement barely hidden. "I'll have something on your desk by the end of the week." When the call ended, Marcus stared out at the city, guilt curling low in his gut. He told himself it was necessary, that a man in his position couldn't afford to ignore who moved so freely through his private world. But underneath the justifications, one truth hummed like Amara's quiet him. He wasn't just protecting his empire. He was prying open the life of the one woman whose presence made him feel alive, and he had no idea what he'd do with what he found. Marcus hated hospitals. He hated the fluorescent lights that flattened every color, the antiseptic bite in the air, the way time seemed to stretch between beeps and footsteps. Most of all, he hated being on this side of the clipboard. Shirt off, paper gown on, stripped of the armor his money and suits usually provided. Same issue, Dr. Levin asked, glasses low on his nose as he scrolled through Marcus's chart. Same issue, Marcus said jaw tight. He didn't add, except when a tired maid with a gospel song is in the room. Some things sounded insane, even in his own head. They ran the tests anyway. Blood work, hormone panels, blood pressure, reflexes, an ultrasound he'd already done twice. Tubes, cuffs, cold gel, glove hands. Marcus lay on the exam table, staring at the ceiling tile with a crack shaped like a lightning bolt, and thought about the way Amara had smoothed his duvet yesterday, fingers deft and sure. Any changes? Levin asked at one point, voice deliberately neutral. Marcus considered lying. He'd done it before. But if there was even a chance someone could put a name to what was happening, he needed every scrap of data on the table. Yes, he said finally, with one woman. Levin's eyebrows lifted. New partner. Not a partner. The word lodged in his throat. She's someone who works in my building. He left it there. He didn't say she changes my sheets or she smells like lemon cleaner and cheap soap, and somehow that's enough to short-circuit my brain. He didn't say my body comes alive when she hums under her breath and dies again the second she leaves with her cleaning cart. The doctor types something into the tablet. So you're able to achieve arousal with this person, but not with others? Marcus hated the clinical language, hated how it reduced the earthquake in his body to a checkbox. Yes, he ground out. Any particular circumstances? Alcohol? Medication? Stress levels different that day. She walked into my penthouse and started humming. Marcus snapped. That's it. Levin didn't flinch. You've tried with other partners since? 3. A humorless huff escaped him. The kind of women tabloids build headlines around. Nothing. More typing. More humming from Levin, but a different kind. Thoughtful, not melodic. Mr. Steele, he said at last, turning the screen so Marcus could see the neat columns of normal ranges and his own numbers. Physically, you're fine. Better than fine, honestly. Hormones, blood flow, cardiovascular health. Nothing here explains a persistent erectile dysfunction, much less one that only resolves with a specific stimulus. Then what does explain it? Frustration sharpened his voice. Because for 2 years, nothing has worked. Suddenly, this one woman shows up with a mop, and my body behaves like it never had a problem. That's not normal. Levin steepled his fingers. I think we've reached the point where we have to talk about the psychological component. Marcus's stomach dropped. You're saying it's all in my head. I'm saying your brain and your body are not separate armies, the doctor replied calmly. Trauma, burnout, emotional shutdown, these things can absolutely manifest physically. You have a history of high stress, minimal sleep, and, if I may be frank, relationships that are transactional. Marcus clenched his fists on a paper sheet. Images flashed through his mind like slides. Smiling for cameras with women whose contracts were thicker than their conversations, empty penthouses in different cities, deals that mattered more than birthdays. What about this woman makes her different? Levin asked. Does she know who you are? She knows I sign her paycheck, Marcus said. That's all. And how does she treat you? He thought of Amara's steady gaze, the way she said, sir, without syrup or fear, the way she'd spoken to his plants and cracked his carefully curated silence with a hymn from another world. Like a person, he admitted quietly. Not a bank account. Levin nodded, as if that confirmed something. It's possible your body is responding not just to physical attraction, but to a sense of safety, authenticity, being seen. Your nervous system might be associating arousal with conditions you haven't allowed yourself in years. So, I'm allergic to models, and only turned on by tired maids? Marcus said dryly. I'm saying connection matters, Levin replied. Intimacy isn't just skin. It's trust, vulnerability, emotional presence. If those pieces are missing, your body might be refusing to cooperate as a kind of protest. Marcus almost laughed, his own biology going on strike. Perfect. What do you suggest? He asked. Meditation? Therapy? Firing every beautiful woman in a 10-mile radius. Levin gave a faint smile. Therapy wouldn't hurt. Neither would examining why you choose partners who reinforce the idea that you're an object, not a person. As for this particular woman, be careful. There's a power imbalance. Workplace dynamics. If you pursue anything, you'll need to tread very, very lightly. Be careful. The words echoed like a warning bell all the way back to the hotel. That night, Marcus sat alone in his penthouse, city lights spilling across his floor like liquid gold. The medical folder lay open on the coffee table, a stack of perfectly normal results that told him absolutely nothing new. He poured himself a drink and didn't touch it. Instead, he replayed every recent encounter in his head. The lingerie model, arching her back in designer lace. Nothing. The celebrity chef, fingers brushing his wrist. Nothing. His ex-fiancée, laughing about the ring she'd almost kept. Nothing. Then Amara, pushing her cart through his doorway with those tired eyes and that stubborn little line between her brows. Amara, humming softly as she straightened his picture frames and opened the balcony for air. Amara, pausing over the skyline like she was stealing a breath before diving back underwater. With her, it wasn't just his body that reacted. His focus shifted. His breathing changed. The static in his head quieted. Maybe the doctor was right. Maybe this wasn't some cruel joke the universe was playing on his anatomy. Maybe it was the inevitable result of spending years surrounded by people who wanted Marcus Steele, asset, not Marcus, human being. He let his head fall back against the couch. How exactly was he supposed to build connection with a woman whose job depended on staying invisible? If he pushed too hard, he risked becoming every harassment headline he'd spent his career avoiding. If he did nothing, he'd go back to being a very rich corpse below the waist. And then there was the part Levin hadn't seen. The way his chest tightened when Amara smiled, small and startled, like she wasn't used to anyone giving her a reason to. The way guilt gnawed at him every time he remembered he'd set Derek on her trail, peeling back her life without permission. A soft chime broke through his thoughts. A message from Derek. Got that info you wanted. We should talk. Marcus stared at the screen, thumb hovering. For a moment he imagined what that file might contain. Late payments, old addresses, maybe a hospital bill or two. Pieces of a life that wasn't padded by zeros. He set the phone down without replying. Levin's words came back to him. Intimacy isn't just skin. It's trust, vulnerability, emotional presence. If he wanted to test whether this thing with Amara was more than his body's desperate grab at the only authentic person in his orbit, he couldn't do it from behind security reports and one-sided knowledge. He'd have to risk something of his own. The thought made his palms sweat more than any hostile takeover ever had. He pictured it. Not another casual question about lobby art or room service, but a real conversation. Telling her something true about himself that wasn't public record. Admitting that sometimes, even at the top of the tallest hotel in the city, he felt like a kid locked out of his own house. It was reckless, dangerous, potentially catastrophic. It was also the first plan that didn't make him feel like a predator circling prey. Marcus closed the medical file and shoved it aside. The numbers weren't going to save him. The scans couldn't tell him how to be a man worth trusting. If his body only woke up for real connection, then that was what he'd have to test. Not just proximity, not just the brush of a hand. The next time Amara wheeled her cart through his door, he wouldn't hide behind small talk and stolen glances. He was going to open a door of his own and see if she stepped through or walked away. Marcus wasn't supposed to be home yet. His calendar said investor dinner, Midtown, 7 p.m. His driver had been briefed, the restaurant booked, the wine pre-selected. But somewhere between the elevator and the car, the thought of spending 3 hours smiling at men who saw him as a walking stock ticker made his skin crawl. He told his assistant to reschedule, loosened his tie, and hit the button for the penthouse instead. The suite was quiet when he stepped inside, city lights already bleeding orange and purple across the windows. For a moment, he thought housekeeping had come and gone. Then he saw her. Amara stood by the sideboard, her back to him, a dust cloth hanging forgotten from her fingers. She was staring at a framed photograph propped against the wall, a picture most people walked past without comment. Marcus, maybe 19, stood on a half-finished hotel balcony, paint on his jeans, wind in his hair. Beside him, a tall man with the same sharp jaw and colder eyes had one hand on his shoulder and the other pointing at an empty skyline, as if everything beyond the frame already belonged to them. His father. Amara leaned in just enough that he knew she was studying the younger version of him, the one who still smiled without calculating the cost. "You're not supposed to be here," Marcus said lightly. She jumped, spinning around, cloth clutched her chest. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't hear you come in. I was just looking," he finished. "It's okay." He walked closer instead of retreating, surprising himself. He usually hated anyone looking too closely at that photo. Tonight, with Amara's eyes still a little wide, he found he didn't mind as much. "You look different," she said carefully, glancing between him and the boy in the frame. "Happier." "Brutally honest," he murmured. "Remind me to never schedule you for PR." A reluctant smile tugged at her mouth before she caught it, professionalism snapping back into place. "I should finish the bedroom and let you rest." "Long day." "They're all long," he said. Then, before he could talk himself out of it, "Stay. Just for a minute. I could use a break from talking to people who want something from me." Her gaze flickered to his. For a second, he thought she'd refuse on principle. Then she nodded, setting the cloth down and folding her hands in front of her. He picked up the frame she'd been studying and turned it over in his hands. "That was the first Ocean Crest we ever opened," he said. "I just finished college. My father flew me out, put a hammer in my hand, and told me if I wanted the company one day, I should at least know how it felt to hold more than a pen." "He looks strict," Amara ventured. "That's one word for it." A humorless laugh escaped him. He believed feelings were a disease. So the only thing softer than a man's heart was his spine. "Spent his life trying to beat both out of me." "That's not true," she said quietly. "About hearts and spines. Try telling him that." Marcus set the photo down, facing the room again. "He died in a boardroom, you know. Heart attack in the middle of a deal. Staff found him with a pen still in his hand. They all said it was poetic." His mouth twisted. "I thought it was pathetic." Amara frowned, not at the story, but at the way his shoulders had tightened. "You're afraid of becoming him," she said softly. "Not a question. A fact." The words landed with more force than any medical diagnosis. Among other things, Marcus admitted, "Sometimes I look at my calendar and it feels like I'm just replaying his life with better hotels and nicer suits. And then there are the women." He hesitated. This was the thin ice Levin had warned him about. But if he wanted to test connection, he had to step out onto it. "They see the money," he said. "The name. The lifestyle. They see a headline, not a person. Part of me wonders if that's all I'll ever be, an asset to acquire, not someone to actually know." Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just heavy. Amara's fingers twisted in the hem of her apron. "Not everyone is like that," she said. "Some of us are just trying to keep the lights on." He looked at her, really looked, at the faint hollows under her eyes, the calluses on her knuckles, the way she never lingered near the minibar or paused to admire the watches on his dresser. "What about you?" he asked. "Who did you have before Ocean Crest? Anyone telling you feelings were a disease?" A soft, wry huff left her. "My husband told me feelings were a luxury." She seemed to hear herself and shook her head. That was more than you needed to know." I asked. He leaned back against the edge of the sideboard, close enough to catch the faint scent of lemon cleaner and something warm underneath. "What happened to him?" Her eyes drifted past his shoulder, focusing on some middle distance the way people did when they were peeling back old wounds. "He got sick," she said, "real fast. We thought it was just a bad flu. Then suddenly we were in a room with doctors saying words I'd only ever heard in TV dramas." Her throat worked. By the time we understood what was happening, it was already over. I'm sorry, Marcus said, the words not nearly big enough. She shrugged, but it was the brittle kind, the one people did when they were propping up walls with their shoulders. Life doesn't ask if you're ready. It just takes what it wants. We had a baby. She needed me breathing more than I needed time to fall apart. Your daughter, he said. Zara. Surprise flashed across her face. How did you? You mentioned her once. He lied smoothly, guilt pricking at his skin. In truth, her name had been in Derek's report alongside words like pediatric oncology and outstanding balance. He hadn't been able to stop thinking about it since. Amara's expression softened at the mention of her child. She's the reason I'm here, she said. Ocean Crest pays better than most places, and they have good health insurance. She glanced around the suite, then back at him. I don't mind cleaning up after people who've never worried about a bill if it means keeping her treatments going. Something tight and hot twisted in his gut. So you work here, he said slowly. And elsewhere? She nodded. Morning shift at a diner. Nights with a cleaning company downtown. She gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. You learn to live on coffee and little naps on buses. He swallowed. Suddenly the way she checked the time, the way she stared out at the ocean like she was stealing breath, made painful sense. You shouldn't have to do that alone, he said. Her eyes met his, fierce now. Lots of people do. I am lucky. I have a job in a place where most folks are decent, and a boss who doesn't notice me unless the glass is streaky. A beat of quiet. He realized she truly believed that in her mind, he was too far above her world to see her at all. The urge to tell her otherwise pulsed under his skin. You're wrong about that last part, he said, voice low. I've noticed you. Color rushed into her cheeks. Her gaze dropped to the floor, then lifted again, uncertain. The air between them seemed to thicken. Mr. Steele, she began. Marcus, he corrected, the word coming out like a request and a plea all at once. Marcus, she repeated, and his name in her mouth did something to him he couldn't have explained in any doctor's office. They stood so close now, he could see the tiny scar near her temple, the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. His hand twitched at his side, wanting to reach out, to tuck a loose curl back under her bun, to prove he was still capable of touching someone without it being a transaction. For a moment, it felt like gravity was tilting them toward each other. Then Amara stepped back, the spell snapping. I really should finish, she said, voice soft but firm. I can't afford to lose this job, not even for conversation. The unspoken word hung between them. Not even for you. He swallowed his disappointment. Of course, he said, forcing a lightness he didn't feel. I didn't mean to keep you. She nodded, picked up her cloth, and moved to the bedroom, her professional mask firmly back in place. Only the slight tremble in her hands betrayed the fact that she wasn't as unaffected as she pretended. When the door finally closed behind her cart, Marcus was left with his father's photograph and the echo of his own name in her voice. The next day, Amara sat in a hard plastic chair at the hospital, a clipboard balanced on her knees. The pediatric oncology ward smelled like disinfectant and fear disguised as hope. Zara slept in the bed beside her, small body dwarfed by white sheets, for line taped carefully to her hand. A financial counselor slid a folder across the tiny table. Numbers glared up at Amara, columns of costs, insurance coverage, and a bottom line that made her stomach turn. This is the estimate for the next round of experimental treatment, the woman said gently. We've applied every subsidy and grant we can, Ms. Williams. The rest is out of pocket, as if she had pockets deep enough to catch that avalanche. Can I set up a payment plan? Amara asked. Her voice sounded thin, even to her own ears. We could try, the counselor said. But if payments fall too far behind, the hospital may have to explore other options. Other options. Stopping. Switching to comfort care. Watching her baby fade. Amara nodded mechanically, signed where they told her to sign, and stared at the total until the numbers blurred. One misstep at the hotel, one complaint, one lost shift, and the entire house of cards would collapse. There was no room for mistakes. No room for lingering looks at a billionaire who smelled like expensive soap and danger. On the opposite side of town, Marcus stood alone in his office, Derek's report glowing on his tablet. Single. Widowed. One daughter, Amara Williams, 8. Diagnosed last year. Multiple admissions to St. Mary's Children's Hospital. Outstanding medical balances. 3 current employers. No criminal record. No debts that weren't medical. Photo attachments. A grainy school picture of Zara, gap-toothed and grinning in a sparkly headband. A shot of Amara in a cheap polo, mopping an office corridor at midnight, shoulders sagging. Marcus's throat burned. He'd expected hardship. He hadn't expected this kind of relentless, grinding battle. She's clean. Derek's voice crackled over the speakerphone. Nos cães, nos cheio de boyfriends, nos seletons. Just life kicking her while she's already down. How did you get the hospital records? Marcus asked quietly. Derek chuckled. You pay me to know how to open doors. I'm just giving you the full picture. Probably smart to keep some distance, boss. This is the kind of thing that can get messy fast. Staff, sick kid, billionaire boss? The optics are a nightmare. Marcus stared at Zara's photo. Maybe some things are supposed to be messy, he said. On the other end, Derek went silent for a beat. Then his tone shifted, cooler. Just remember, Victoria Chun would kill for a scandal she could spin, he said. Meridian's been sniffing around since your Tokyo deal. Don't hand her the bullet, yeah? The warning was framed as loyalty, but something about the way he said Victoria's name made Marcus's skin prickle. When the call ended, he dropped into his chair and let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Admiration and guilt warred inside him. Admiration for a woman who worked herself raw to keep her child alive. Guilt because every charged glance, every conversation he'd coaxed out of her, had added another complication she couldn't afford. He couldn't fix this with a check. Not without insulting her. Not without turning their fragile, almost connection into another transaction. But he also couldn't stand by and pretend he didn't know. Whether she ever wanted him or not, one thing was suddenly clear. He was going to help her. He didn't know how yet. Quietly, through foundations and anonymous donors, or loudly, if that was what it took. But the idea of going back to a life where her struggle was just background noise felt as remote as the boy in the photo beside his father. Somewhere across the skyline, Zara was hooked up to a machine that beeped with every fragile heartbeat. Somewhere closer, Amara was probably tying on another apron, another uniform, another mask. And in a high-rise office not far away, Victoria Chun tapped a manicured nail against a folder Derek had already duplicated for her. A slow smile curving her lips as she realized Marcus Steele had finally shown the world his weakness. Love could resurrect a man. It could also bring him to his knees. Marcus lasted 3 days. 3 days of trying to be professional. 3 days of leaving the penthouse when he knew her shift was starting, only to find some excuse to come back halfway through anyway. 3 days of pretending his body wasn't wired to the sound of her humming. On the 4th day, the pretense snapped. He was pacing his living room, Tokyo contract open on his tablet, when he heard the familiar soft clatter of a cart in the hallway. His pulse kicked before his brain could talk him down. This time, he didn't move to the sideboard and pretend to read emails. He went to the door and opened it before she could knock. Amara froze in the doorway, her hand on the cart handle. Her hair was pulled back, wisps escaping around her face. There were darker shadows under her eyes than usual, but when she saw him, something like relief flickered there before she smoothed it away. "Good morning, sir," she said. "I can come back if—" "No," he said too quickly. "Come in, please." She hesitated, then pushed the cart past him. The scent of lemon and soap followed. His body responded instantly, traitorous and alive. He let the door click shut and leaned against it, watching as she moved into the room, setting fresh towels in the bathroom, checking the minibar. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" he asked. The question slipped out before he could dress it up. Amara glanced over her shoulder. "Pretending what?" "That you're invisible," he said. "That I don't see you." Her fingers tightened around a folded towel. "Mr. Steele." "Marcus," he said, stepping toward her. "I need you to hear me as a man right now, not as your boss." His heart hammered. He'd faced hostile boards and government regulators with less fear than this. She set the towels down very carefully. "Okay," she said slowly. Marcus. His name in her mouth steadied him and shook him all at once. For 2 years, he said, my body has been a corpse. Doctors, specialists, every solution money could buy. Nothing. I tried to fix it with more work, more distraction, more meaningless encounters. Nothing worked. She swallowed, eyes flickering to his and away again. And then, he continued, you walked into my suite humming a song about home, and suddenly I remembered what it was to feel. Not just there. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Everywhere. The noise in my head quieted. The room felt less like a box and more like air. Marcus, she whispered, warning and plea tangled together. I've tried to ignore it, he said. I've tested it over and over. Models, actresses, an ex who once nearly had my ring. Nothing. Then you push a cart through my door, and I'm more alive than I've been in years. It's not just physical. It's like my whole nervous system recognizes you and refuses to do it for anyone else. Silence thickened between them, humming with the same charge that had been building for weeks. Amara's gaze dropped to the floor. When she spoke, her voice shook. You can't say things like that to me, she said. Not when you're you and I'm. She gestured at her uniform. This. He closed the distance until only a foot remained between them. Close enough to see the tiny line at the corner of her mouth where worry lived. What are you? He asked softly. Because I see someone who works 3 jobs and still takes the time to straighten a stranger's picture frame. Someone who hums lullabies to keep herself from falling apart. Someone whose smile makes this place feel less like a monument and more like a home. Her eyes lifted to his then, and there was no hiding the way they shone. I feel it too, she admitted, the words spilling out as if dragged from somewhere deep. I have since that first day. I try not to. I tell myself I'm tired or lonely or that it's just because you're... But every time I walk in here and you're in the room, my chest gets tight and my hands shake and I forget why I swore I'd never, ever get involved with anyone from work. He exhaled, relief and hunger tangled. So if I'm not insane, you are absolutely insane, she said, a shaky laugh breaking free. And so am I. Because I think about you when I'm on the bus. I hear your voice when I'm wiping down tables at the diner. And then I remember Zara hooked up to machines and the stack of bills on my counter, and I shove it all into a box and slam the lid. Her daughter's name landed between them like a boundary line. He reached out, slowly, giving her every chance to move away, and curled his fingers around the edge of the housekeeping cart instead of her hand. I don't know what this is, he said. I just know I'm drowning in a life that looked perfect on paper until you walked in and made me realize how numb I was. I'm not asking you to fall at my feet. I'm asking you to stop pretending we don't both feel it. Her throat worked. Tears glittered at the corners of her eyes. This could ruin me, she whispered. One rumor, one complaint, and I'm done. No recommendations. No steady job. No insurance. Zara's treatments depend on me keeping this uniform. I would never. You might not have to, she cut in, voice breaking. All it takes is one person seeing me walking out of your room looking like this. She dashed a hand over her cheek. You might get a slap on the wrist and a bad headline. I lose everything. He hated that she was right. Hated that his world cushioned his falls while hers turned every misstep into a cliff. For a moment, he almost stepped back, almost let the fear win. Instead, he did the riskiest thing he'd done since taking over his first hotel. He reached for her hand. Her breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. Her fingers were rough from cleaning chemicals and constant work, but they fit against his palm like they'd been there before in another life. Tell me no, he said, voice low, and I'll back off. I'll be your boss and nothing more. I'll find a way to live with this half-life again. But if you feel even a fraction of what I do, don't lie to both of us. Her eyes closed. A tear traced down her cheek. I'm so tired of saying no to myself, she whispered. Then she stepped toward him. The dam didn't crack. It shattered. He tugged her closer, free hand sliding to the small of her back. She rose on her toes, one palm flattening against his chest as if to steady herself. For a heartbeat, they just hovered there, breath mingling, the electricity between them almost painful. Then their mouths met. The kiss was nothing like the practice performances he'd endured for cameras and egos. It was messy and hungry and terrifying. Years of numbness exploded into sensation. Heat, pressure, the soft gasp she made when he cupped her jaw, the way her fingers tightened in his shirt like she needed proof he was real. His body responded with a ferocity that stole his breath. Every nerve lit up. Every cell sang. It was as if his entire system had been waiting for this one specific combination. Her scent, her taste, the way she murmured his name against his lips. Marcus, she breathed, and he thought he could live on just that. They staggered back until the edge of the bed caught his legs. He sat, pulling her between his knees, noses brushing, kisses slowing in his softer, reverent presses. For the first time in 2 years, desire didn't feel like a problem to solve. It felt like coming home, which was exactly why it terrified her. She broke the kiss abruptly, stepping back so fast his hands fell from her waist. Amara, I can't, she said, tears spilling now. God, I want to. You have no idea. But I can't gamble Zara's life on this. On you. He flinched, but she pressed on, words tumbling out. Today you want me. Tomorrow a board member whispers in your ear about optics and scandals, and you'll have to choose between me and $1 billion empire. And I can't be the idiot who believed a fairy tale and cost her kid chemo. That's not fair, he said hoarsely. You don't know what I'd choose. I know you don't get to be where you are by choosing the maid over the money, she said, voice raw. Even if you want to. Even if you mean it right now. The worst part was, he couldn't argue. Not honestly. Pain carved lines in her face. She swiped at her cheeks, glaring at the tears. I need this job, she said. More than I need this. Her hand fluttered between them. So, if we're going to keep pretending, you have to help me. You can't pull me into your gravity every time I walk in here. I won't survive it. His chest felt like it was caving in, but he nodded. Okay, he said. Okay, I'll figure out a way to make this safer. For you. For Zara. I swear. She looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing whether to believe him, then turned away, grabbing the handle of her cart like a lifeline. When the door closed behind her, the suite felt emptier than it had in years. He didn't know that they weren't alone. Tiny, black lenses nestled in the corners of the ceiling blinked silently, capturing every lingering touch, every hungry glance. One above the headboard, one in the vent near the door, another disguised as a screw in the molding. Derek watched the feed later from a secure tablet, jaw tight. On the split screen, Marcus lifted his fingers to his lips as if trying to memorize the taste of her, while Amara leaned her forehead against the hallway wall, shoulders shaking. You weren't kidding, Derek muttered, tapping the screen to zoom in. He's gone. He packaged the footage with practiced efficiency, trimming it just enough to make it damning and intimate in equal measure. A kiss here. Hands there. A shot of Amara in uniform, Marcus's bare feet visible on the marble. The file went into a labeled folder before being uploaded to an encrypted drive. Across town, Victoria Chin's phone buzzed. She opened the preview, watched 30 seconds, and smiled like a shark. Perfect, she said. We'll sit on this until his European expansion is inked. Then we'll let the world see how Mr. Untouchable treats his staff. Back in the penthouse, Marcus stared at the door Amara had just walked through and swore to his silent room. He would not lose her to fear. He would find a way to make loving her less dangerous than losing her. He just didn't know that the most dangerous moment of all, the one they just shared, was already queued up, waiting to explode his life on screens around the world. Chaos didn't arrive with thunder. It slipped in through a notification. Marcus was halfway through a call with the European investors, discussing final terms for the Barcelona property, when his phone vibrated a second, then a third time. His watch buzzed. His laptop pinged. A storm of alerts hit him from every direction. Is there a problem, Mr. Steele? One of the investors asked. No, he said automatically. Just a minor. His assistant burst into the conference room without knocking, face drained of color. Sir, she said, ignoring the horrified looks from the men on the screen. You need to see this. Now. Something in her voice cut deeper than any board threat. Gentlemen, I'll need to reschedule, Marcus said, already ending the call. An internal emergency. He grabbed his phone. The first notification was from a news app. The headline hit him like a punch. Billionaire hotelier caught with Maid. Ocean Crest power imbalance scandal. Below it, a thumbnail image. Him and Amara in his bedroom, her hands fisted in his shirt, his mouth inches from hers. Grainy, zoomed from outside, but unmistakable. The next notification was worse. A video, 30 seconds long, already racking up hundreds of thousands of views. He pressed play. His own suite filled the screen. The angle was from the corner, high up like a security camera that shouldn't exist. He watched himself reach for Amara, saw the hesitation in her eyes, the way she still leaned in. When their lips met, the camera captured everything. The desperation, the tenderness, the way his hands framed her face like she was something sacred. The caption under the reposted clip read, "When your billionaire boss promotes the maid to private service." Marcus's stomach dropped. "Where did this come from?" he asked, voice low and dangerous. "Everywhere," his assistant whispered. "Social media, gossip sites, news blogs." Someone dropped the footage to 3 major tabloids at once. "They're calling HR nonstop." His phone rang again. This time, it was the chairman of the board. "Conference room," the older man said. "Now." The hotel that afternoon felt like a living organism infected with rumor. Staff clusters broke apart when Marcus walked by. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. He caught fragments anyway. "Have you seen it? Poor girl. She knew what she was doing. He's finished." No, he won't even feel it. In the service corridor, someone had frozen the clip on a tablet. Amara's face tilted up, eyes closed, lips parted. A housekeeper hurried to turn it off when she saw him, but the damage was done. "Sir," she stammered. I didn't." "Turn it off," he said quietly, "and get back to work." On the staff bulletin board outside HR, a fresh notice had been tacked up. "Suspension, pending investigation, Amara Williams." He read it twice, the words blurring. Inside the HR office, the director wouldn't quite meet his gaze. "We had to suspend her," she said. "Standard procedure. We've been getting calls from employees who feel unsafe, from union reps, from lawyers sniffing around for class action. They're using phrases like abuse of power and hostile work environment." "Unsafe," Marcus repeated, sick. "From Amara?" "They don't know her like you do," the director said gently. "They see the video and they see a pattern. Rich boss, low-level employee, closed door. You know how this plays." He did. "Too well. Stay out of it for now," she added. "If you talk to her, they'll say you're intimidating a witness. Let us handle the internal side." "They've already decided she's guilty," he said. "They've already decided you are," she replied. "We're just trying to limit the fallout." The boardroom felt like a courtroom. 12 faces, some angry, some anxious, some quietly pleased, turned toward him as he took his seat at the head of the polished table. Newspapers and printed screenshots were scattered like evidence. "This is bad," Marcus, Richard, the chairman, said without preamble. The stock dropped 9% in 2 hours. The Yamamoto deal is on hold. Half our key clients are demanding a statement by end of day. A younger board member jabbed a finger at one of the printouts. "Look at this. Predator in a penthouse. Ocean Crest's dirty secret. They're painting you as some kind of serial abuser. And her as a scheming opportunist," another added. Hashtag Maid to Mistress is already trending. Marcus's jaw clenched. "She's not an opportunist. That's not the point." Richard's voice was tired. "Perception is reality in our business. We have a path through this, but you're not going to like it." "Let me guess," Marcus said. "Throw her to the wolves. Publicly terminate the employee in question," the legal counsel corrected. "Issue a statement acknowledging a lapse in judgment, emphasizing that there was no coercion, that the relationship has ended. Announce a third-party review of our internal policies. Then we move on. Privately." Another board member cut in. "We pay her a generous settlement with a non-disclosure agreement. Lifetime hotel vouchers, cash, whatever it takes to keep her quiet. She disappears, this goes away." "And me?" Marcus asked, voice dangerously calm. "We spin this as an isolated mistake," Richard said. "You're human. You made an error. You've learned. We remain confident in your leadership, but you'll need to step back from public appearances for a quarter. No red carpets, no panels. Let the news cycle move on." And if I don't fire her? Marcus asked. Then you confirm every accusation, someone snapped. You show investors you care more about your infatuation than the company. Another member leaned forward. There are rumblings about a vote to temporarily remove you as CEO if this isn't handled swiftly. We don't want that, Marcus. But we have a fiduciary duty. So my options are sacrifice her or get sacrificed with her, he summarized. Your options, Richard said quietly, are to protect the thousands of people who work for Ocean Crest, or burn it all down over one maid. The word hit harder than it should have. Maid, as if that's all she was. He stared at the scattered stills of their kiss. In every frame, the connection was obvious. Not force, not calculation, just two people clinging to a moment that felt like oxygen. They saw leverage. He saw truth. Fine, he said at last, the word tasting like ash. Draft your statement. Schedule the press conference. Relief washed around the table like a tide. Phones were lifted. Emails fired off. The machine roared to life. Only Richard watched him closely. You're doing the right thing, the older man said. This is a blip. You'll recover. Marcus didn't answer. Later, in the privacy of his office, the official statement sat on his desk. Sincere regret. Inappropriate relationship. Lapse in judgment. Commitment to reviewing policies. Appreciation for the brave employees who came forward. The language was carefully crafted to satisfy investors, activists, and gossip sites in one bland paragraph. All it required was his signature. He didn't pick up the pen. Instead, he opened the viral clip again. This time, he muted the sound. He watched his own hands cradle Amara's face like something precious. Watched the way she leaned into him, not in calculation, but like someone who'd been holding herself upright alone for too long. In slow motion, he could see every tremor, every breath, every moment where they almost pulled away and didn't. The world called it scandal. To him, it looked like two exhausted people finding one clean moment in a life full of sharp edges. His chest ached. He thought of Amara sitting in some tiny apartment, reading comments from strangers who didn't know her, calling her names they'd never dare say to his face. He thought of Zara in a hospital bed, algorithms deciding whether her mother would be employable after this. This was the crossroads Levin had warned him about, long before there'd been leaked footage. The moment he had to decide whether he was his father's son. The empty path was clear. Sign the paper, fire the maid, save the empire. The other path was nothing but fog. Marcus set the unsigned statement aside, the pen untouched. In the silent office, with the clip paused on Amara's upturned face, he made his choice. He just wasn't ready for anyone else to hear it yet. The ballroom looked like a battlefield dressed in designer suits. Cameras bristled along the back wall, red recording lights blinking in unison. Reporters packed every chair, more lining the sides. Phones held high, live streams already counting viewers in the hundreds of thousands. Screens behind the podium looped the same still image. Marcus Steele with his mouth on a maid's, scandal distilled into one damning frame. This is a mistake, Richard murmured at his elbow. Stick to the statement. We get through this, we rebuild. Marcus adjusted his tie, not because it needed it, but because his hands had to do something other than shake. Relax, he said. I'll give them something to talk about. A PR handler handed him the printed speech one last time. Neat paragraphs, carefully vetted. It might as well have been written in someone else's blood. As he stepped up to the podium, a roar rose, shouted questions, camera shutters, the restless rustle of people smelling blood. Mr. Steele, is it true you coerced your employee? Did she sleep with you for promotion? Are you stepping down today? He held up a hand. The room grudgingly fell into a tense hush. Good afternoon, he began, voice carrying in the charged silence. I'll address your questions, but first, I want to be very clear about a few things. He glanced down at the script. Then he folded it in half and set it aside. A ripple went through the room. The footage you've all seen is real, he said. Yes, that is my penthouse. Yes, that is me. And yes, that is a woman who works for my hotel. A low murmur. Pen scribbled. Someone zoomed in on his face, hunting for remorse. What you haven't seen, Marcus continued, is how that footage was obtained or why. He tapped the tablet on the podium. Behind him, The big screen flickered, shifting from the tabloid still to a series of black and white images. The layout of his suite, overlaid with tiny, blinking dots. "These," he said, "are unauthorized cameras discovered in my private residence and several employee areas. They were hidden in vents, light fixtures, even screws. None of them were installed by our security team." The next slide showed timestamp logs, feeds being accessed from external IP, clips downloaded and transferred. Our internal investigation traced those feeds to a device registered to our own head of security, Derek Hart. Marcus said, each word steady. "And from there to payments made by Meridian Hotels, owned by my charming competitor, Victoria Chin." Gasps. A few curses. Somewhere, a lawyer's phone buzzed nonstop. The following slide was an email chain, names redacted except for Derek's and Victoria's. Dates lined up with the day the scandal broke. "For weeks," Marcus said, "my home and my staff are being spied on without consent. My private moments, and more importantly, the privacy of the people who work in this building, were treated as leverage for a hostile takeover." He met the nearest camera head-on. "As of this morning, Derek Hart and all Meridian affiliates are banned from Ocean Crest properties worldwide. We are filing criminal charges for illegal surveillance, invasion of privacy, and corporate espionage. Every employee whose image was captured without their knowledge will be notified and offered legal support at the company's expense." Reporters erupted. "Did you know about this before the leak? Are you blaming your rival to dodge responsibility? Were there other private moments recorded?" Marcus let the storm wash over him, then raised his hand again. "None of this," he said, "erases the fact that you saw me kissing one of my employees. You're right to have questions about power, consent, and boundaries. So let's talk about that." The room quieted, leaning in. "Her name," he said, "is Amara Williams." He watched the name hit them like a pebble in a pond. "She did not seduce me for a promotion. She did not blackmail me. She did not ask for money, favors, or special treatment. If anything, she did everything she could to avoid being alone with me, because she understood the risk better than I did." He paused. The image of her standing in his suite, hands shaking, burned into his mind. "For 2 years," he said, "my body and my life were numb. I had every resource, every expert, every distraction money could buy. None of it worked. Then a housekeeper in a yellow apron walked into my penthouse, humming a song about home, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt alive." A murmur rolled through the press. "This scandal has revealed a lot about how we see people like Amara," Marcus went on. "I've read your headlines. Gold digger, maid turned mistress. The assumption is always the same. If a woman from a working-class background is seen with a rich man, she must be scheming. If a billionaire feels something for her, he must be preying." He let his frustration edge into his voice. "Maybe," he said, "the story is simpler. Maybe a man who's been treated like a walking balance sheet his whole life met the only person in his world who looked him in the eye and saw a human being instead of a brand." A beat of silence. "I am in love with Amara Williams," he said plainly. "Not with what I can buy her or what headlines we make, but with her. With the way she works 3 jobs to keep her daughter alive. With the way she hums when she's scared. With the way she straightens picture frames in rooms that aren't hers because she still believes in order in a world that keeps hurting her." Flashbulbs exploded. Someone swore softly. A few reporters just stared, stunned. "To be clear," Marcus added, "this doesn't absolve me. I hold the power. I should have recognized sooner what putting her in that position could cost her. The board wanted me to stand here today and say it was a mistake, that it's over, that I barely knew her." He smiled then, a sharp, unexpected thing. "I'm not going to do that." He turned one of the pages of the discarded speech, then pushed it away entirely. "Instead," he said, "I'm going to do something my father never would have forgiven." The next slide appeared on the screen, the Ocean Crest logo beside a new name. The Zara Williams Foundation. "For months, I've known that Amara's daughter is fighting cancer," Marcus said, voice softening. "I learned more than I had any right to know from people who violated her privacy. I can't undo that, but I can choose what I do with that knowledge." He looked out over the crowd, seeing not cameras, but all the kids whose names never made it into stories like his. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down as CEO of Ocean Crest Hotels, he announced. The room exploded. You're resigning? Is this because of investor pressure? Who will replace you? He raised his voice over the chaos. I'm selling a substantial portion of my shares, he said, to endow the Amara Williams Foundation, which will fund cutting-edge pediatric cancer treatment for families who can't pay the price tag attached to their children's lives. The board will choose the next CEO. I'll stay on as a minority shareholder and advisor, but I will not be the face of a company that asks me to apologize for loving someone outside a tax bracket. A reporter near the front shouted, "What do you say to investors who think you're throwing away your legacy over a maid?" He didn't flinch. I say they were never paying attention, Marcus replied. What good is a legacy built on pretending you're made of stone? If the only way to stay on top is to sacrifice the one person who reminded me I have a heart, then they're welcome to build their fortunes with someone else. He leaned in, letting every word land. I would rather be broke and in love than rich and empty. The ballroom buzzed like a live wire. Does Ms. Williams know about this? Someone called. Not yet, he said, but she's about to find out. He stepped back from the podium to a barrage of questions he didn't answer. Security moved in, shielding him from the crush as he exited through a side door, the roar of the press fading behind him like a distant storm. On a flickering TV mounted in the corner of a hospital room, Marcus's face filled the screen. Amara stood frozen, a styrofoam cup of coffee cooling in her hand. Zara dozed lightly, cartoon stickers dotting the four-pole. The volume had been low, background noise against the steady beep of monitors. But when she heard Marcus say her full name into a sea of microphones, her heart stopped. I am in love with Amara Williams. The cup trembled. Coffee sloshed over her fingers. She barely felt the burn. Nurses slowed in the hallway, glancing at the broadcast. Two other parents in the lounge craned their necks to see. She watched, numb, as he laid their private moments bare. Not the details, but the truth. Heard him spit her reality. 3 jobs, a sick kid, into a room full of people who'd only ever written her as a punchline. When the foundation logo flashed on screen, when she heard Zara's name spoken like a promise, her knees nearly gave out. He can't do that, she whispered. He can't give all that up. A nurse paused at the doorway. Isn't that your boss? She asked, eyes wide. Not anymore, Amara said faintly, watching him announce his resignation. Tears blurred her vision. Fear and awe and something like terror warred at her chest. If he meant it, everything had just changed. If he didn't, if this was some grand, guilt-soaked gesture that the board would quietly undo tomorrow, she and Zara would be the ones left standing in the wreckage. She set the coffee down with shaking hands, walked to Zara's bedside, and pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. I'll be back, she whispered. Stay brave for me, okay? Zara's eyelids fluttered. Where you going? She mumbled. Amara swallowed hard. To see if a crazy man really just set our whole lives on fire, she said, or if he finally decided to stand in it with us. She grabbed her coat and bolted for the elevator, heart pounding. By the time she reached the street, every news van in the city seemed lined up in front of the hospital, cameras swiveling as she pushed past. Taxis honked. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Unknown numbers, messages from coworkers, a single text from an unknown sender that simply read, "He's really doing it." She didn't slow down. At the Ocean Crest, barricades struggled to contain the crowd. Reporters swarmed the entrance, shouting questions at anyone in uniform. Security tried to hold the line as she fought her way forward, one hand shielding her face. Ms. Williams, are you Amara? Did you know about the foundation? Are you in love with him too? Their words crashed over her like waves. She didn't answer. All she could hear was Marcus's voice echoing from the broadcast, stripped bare and stubborn. I would rather be broke and in love than rich and empty. Standing on the sidewalk, chest heaving, cameras turned toward her like a firing squad. Amara realized she was about to find out whether he'd meant every word, or if she was just another story he'd told to save himself. The Ocean Crest lobby had never been this loud. Cameras pressed against the velvet ropes, flashes popping like lightning. Guests clustered on balconies and along the mezzanine rail, phones held high to catch a better angle. The marble floor, usually a controlled river of luggage and designer heels, felt more like a stage. The crowd parted when Amara stepped through the revolving doors. For a second, everything seemed to slow. Her cheap coat, the one she'd yanked on over scrubs and worry, looked wildly out of place against the crystal chandeliers. Her hair was hastily tied back, curls escaping around her face, eyes wide and shining with a storm of emotions. Someone shouted, "That's her!" and the cameras pivoted as one. Questions battered her from every side. "Amara, did you know he was stepping down? Are you going to marry him? Is the foundation legit or a PR stunt?" She flinched but kept walking, gaze locked on the reception desk ahead, like it was the only solid thing in the room. Marcus saw her before the rest of the lobby did. He'd been standing near the elevators with Richard and a pack of lawyers, enduring one last round of damage control suggestions. Every word blurred until the crowd shifted and he caught a glimpse of yellow, her Ocean Crest apron peeking out from under the coat, and the rest of the world fell away. "Give us a minute," he said. "Marcus, this isn't wise," Richard hissed. "I've made my choice," he replied, already moving. He didn't rush, but he didn't hesitate either. Each step felt like walking out an old life and into the one he'd been too afraid to imagine. The cameras swung, desperate to catch the collision. Amara stopped in the center of the lobby, just inside the circle of light from the chandelier, as if some instinct told her that was where he'd meet her. When he reached her, the noise dimmed to a distant roar. Up close, he saw the red rims around her eyes, the dried coffee stain on her sleeve, the fear and stubborn hope warring in her expression. "Hi," he said softly. It was absurdly inadequate and, somehow, all he had. "Hi," she echoed, breathless. For a moment, neither of them moved. "I'm sorry," he said, the words low but carrying. "For every way, I made your life harder. For kissing you before I understood the cost. For letting other people use your name like a weapon. You deserved better than that." Tears sprang to her eyes again. "You said my name in front of the whole world," she whispered. "You said Zurus." "I did," he said. "If they were going to drag you into the spotlight, they were going to hear the truth about who you are. Not a caricature, not a scandal. You." She swallowed. "You quit your job." "I quit the part of my life that required pretending you didn't matter," he corrected. "The company will be fine without me sitting in the big chair. I won't be fine without being able to look you in the eye." Emotions flickered across her face. Anger, worry, something dangerously close to love. "What happens when the money disappears?" she asked, voice steadying. "When the board rewrites history and you're not a king anymore, just a man with fewer zeros. When the headlines move on and it's just us and the bills and the hospital." He expected the question. He'd been asking himself variations of it for days. "The foundation funding is already locked," he said. "The sale closed this morning, before the press conference. Even if the board throws a tantrum, they can't touch Zara's treatments or any other kids. The Amara Williams Foundation is irrevocable." She blinked, thrown. "You already did it." "I wasn't going to stand up there and make promises the lawyers could undo," he said. "As for the hospital, I'm turning one of my private properties into a research partnership with St. Mary's. Jobs, housing for families, long-term support. You won't have to take 3 buses to get to your daughter anymore." Her hand flew to her mouth. "And what about you?" she demanded, voice shaking. "What if the next deal doesn't happen? What if they blacklist you? Are you really ready to start over from zero?" "I've spent most of my life as a walking corpse in an expensive suit," he said quietly. "If starting over means waking up next to you and Zara in a rented apartment, I'll consider that a promotion." A laugh punched out of her, half disbelieving, half broken. "You don't even know what it looks like," she said. "Real life. Not penthouse life. Grocery lists and insurance calls and nights where Zara can't sleep and you can't fix it." "I know I don't," he said. "Teach me." He took one more step, erasing the last of the distance. "I'm not asking you for a fairy tale," he said. "I'm asking for a chance to be there, to carry some of the weight you've been holding alone, to build something that doesn't depend on stock prices and public opinion." Her eyes searched his, as if trying to find the man who used to hide behind boardroom glass. Instead, She found the one standing bare in front of her, every flaw and fear on display. "I'm still mad at you," she said finally. "Good," he replied. "You deserve that." "And I'm scared," she added. "Me too. And if you hurt Zara—" "I won't," he cut in fierce. "I swear. On everything I have left." The lobby held its breath. Slowly, Amara lowered her hand. "Okay," she whispered. "One chance. Not because of the cameras. Not because of the foundation. Because of how you looked when you said my name up there, like you finally remembered you have a soul." Relief crashed over him, so hard his knees almost buckled. "Fair warning," he said, a shaky smile threatening. "I'm terrible at normal. I may need spreadsheets for grocery shopping." She huffed out a laugh. "We'll start with teaching you how to take the bus without buying it." He reached for her then, not with the hungry desperation of their first kiss, but with a quiet certainty. His hand found her cheek, thumb brushing away the last of her tears. "Can I?" he asked. "In front of everyone?" she murmured, glancing at the sea of cameras. "Let them see what they tried to turn into a scandal," he said. "Something real." She took a breath, lifted her chin, and closed the distance. The kiss was softer this time, but no less powerful. Applause broke out somewhere to the left. Flashes strobed. Guests cheered. Someone wolf whistled. None of it mattered. For Marcus, there was only the woman in his arms and the knowledge that every piece of him, heart, mind, body, was finally, fully, undeniably awake. 6 months later, the lobby of the Ocean Crest looked different. The chandeliers still sparkled, but the energy had shifted. Staff laughed more openly. Guests lingered in conversation with front desk clerks. A bulletin board near the elevators displayed photos from the new Amara Williams pediatric wing. Kids in superhero capes, nurses in matching socks, parents smiling through tears. In one of those photos, Marcus stood with Zara on his shoulders, her hair growing back in soft curls, both of them making ridiculous faces at the camera. The real Marcus was upstairs, in an office half the size of his old one. The plaque on the door read, "Amara Williams Foundation, Executive Director." Amara leaned in the doorway, tablet in hand, watching him wrestle with a temperamental printer. "You know you could just call IT," she said, amused. "I'm IT now," he muttered. "Budget doesn't cover a full-time tech wizard yet." She stepped in to help, pressing a button he'd missed. The printer whirred back to life. "See," she said, "you rich people overcomplicate everything." He slid an arm around her waist and bumped his forehead against hers. "I'm working on downgrading to people levels," he said. "How am I doing?" She pretended to consider. "You only offer to buy the grocery store once this month," she said. "Progress." Their phone buzzed at the same time, a calendar alert. "Hospital," Amara said, ringing the bell. Marcus smiled. Down the hall, Zara was putting on her coat, arguing with a nurse about whether she really needed a hat, when I'm basically done being sick. She'd been declared in remission 2 weeks ago, but today was the official ceremony, complete with bell ringing, applause, and enough cake to feed the entire ward. On their way out, they passed a framed article on the foundation's work. The headline highlighted survival rates and community impact, not scandals. Ocean Crest had stabilized under new leadership. Some of the board members who'd wanted Marcus's head were gone, retired or voted out. Others had quietly become donors. In the evenings, after foundation meetings and hotel check-ins at the small boutique property they now co-owned, a cozy, plant-filled place where the staff called guests by name and nobody hid cameras and vents. They went home to a modest coastal house with peeling paint and a view that made Amara's shoulders drop the second she stepped onto the porch. It wasn't perfect. Some days were hard. Bills still came. Zara still had checkups and nightmares. Marcus still wrestled with the guilt of the past and the discomfort of letting other people see him vulnerable. But every morning, he woke up with Amara's head on his shoulder and Zara's loud opinions drifting in from the hallway, and the old emptiness felt like someone else's life. One night, as waves shushed against the shore outside their bedroom window, Marcus lay beside Amara, tracing idle patterns on her arm. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked quietly. "The old life. The power. The certainty." He thought about boardrooms and private jets, about being revered and feared and never truly known. "Sometimes I miss the illusion," he admitted. It was easier not feeling anything. No risk. No responsibility beyond numbers on a screen. And now, she pressed. He rolled onto his side, propping himself on his elbow to really look at her. The woman who dragged him back from a life that looked like victory and felt like a slow death. Now I wake up terrified half the time, he said. Of losing you. Of failing Zara. Of messing up things that actually matter. He smiled, soft and stunned, like the realization still surprised him. It's the best kind of fear I've ever known. She leaned up to kiss him, slow and lingering. No cameras, no scandal, just warmth and sheer breath. His body responded instantly, but there was no edge of panic anymore, no sense of miracle about to vanish. Just a deep, grounded knowing that this woman, this life, this endless learning was what he'd been starving for without even realizing it. Her hand slid over his chest, coming to rest above his heart. Hard to believe there was a time you didn't feel anything, she murmured. For 2 years, he said, brushing her hair back from her face, my manhood didn't rise for anyone. My heart didn't either. I thought I was broken. She smiled, eyes warm and wicked. And now, he replied, lowering his mouth to hers, with you every part of me is finally, fiercely, undeniably alive. Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed Marcus and Amara's journey, drop a comment below and tell us your favorite part. Was it the first time his body finally reacted, the shocking press conference, or their reunion in the hotel lobby? Your feedback helps decide the kind of stories that get told next. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another forbidden love, high-stakes romance like this one. And when you're done commenting, click the story thumbnail on your screen to dive straight into another thrilling episode waiting just for you.